Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So this will be the paper 2 analysis, Public Administration Mains 2024. My 2 cents on this paper would be, it was relatively an easy paper. Most of the topics were more or less usual, which have been consistently asked, except for few aberrations. They are more current affairs based. And in fact, I would not say current affairs based, but it was, I would say, a kind of lack of innovation on the part of UPSC. Thirdly, the nature of the questions were again same, picking up an issue, right? Keeping the second ARC as the base and picking up the issue and matching it to the current developments, right? That is the core idea of how the paper 2 is designed. So in my sense, it was quite easy, except obviously the 2-3 controversial questions. When I say controversial, I mean to say there were issues, right, which were more or less perpetually a problem for governance in India. So in that sense, it has covered, though it is quite shocking in the sense that they have not covered largely the important areas, especially the journalist versus specialist debate, lateral entry issues, collector, district administration, and exclusive, specific focus on administrative reforms. Then more or less the regulatory mechanisms, and I would say the issues concerning gender, right, gender inclusion, politics in gender. So these kind of things have not been much asked, which was expected, though just before a week before the exam, we had given a list to the students, right? So majority of the questions are exactly the way it was given, except, like I said, few questions. Paper 1 exactly was the same. Fine. So let's see what we can make out of this paper. Right? It's an interesting paper in terms of analysis. Okay. So let me just start with question 1. I hope it is visible to you. Okay. So let's start with the first question. Right. This is again on the expected lines. Ethics in public services has been the main concern of Kautilya's Arthashastra. Examine the statement, right? Obviously, this paper is quite descriptive in nature. That's the problem. Right. So let's take this question. Obviously, the Kautilya's main concern regarding the governance, right, comes from his book Arthashastra. So Arthashastra is the primary source. But what is this Arthashastra about? Now that is, you need not accept the statement as it is. Fine, though it is 10 marks, you can write the points which are in support, but you can also counter the idea through a counter perspective. Arthashastra is basically a book on statecraft. As most of you know, statecraft, realpolitik, focusing on realism, right, and not idealism. The certain elements of, so we could start obviously with the core idea, right? How he visualizes the state or the state of nature, basically a similar idea to Hobbes, the Leviathan. So the state of nature is basically anarchic. That's what he calls the Mats Nyaya, right? So concern of Kautilya, right? Ethics in public service. This is the core. So he visualizes state of nature as the anarchic Mats Nyaya. So that Mats Nyaya can be overcome by a established system, right? Established system of authority. So in Kautilya's analysis, right, the primary role of the state is what? To create order in the society. And rule of law is also fundamental. Though for them, the rule of law was not the law and rationality that we talk about today. So he has primarily talked about this diplomacy, concern for power, and obviously the use of power in order to establish and maintain the control of authority. He visualizes king, the statement that he gives, in the happiness of his subject lies the happiness of the king. So only probably that aspect is more, seems to be more ethical, right? But yes, he believes that king has certain roles. What is the role? Palan. He wants to nurture people, right? He has the role of providing guardianship to the people, rakshan, protection of the people, yogakshem, welfare of the people. Okay, swamin, acting as a swamin, that is the raja, the rural swamin here obviously gives a sense of somewhere who is the controller, right? So he does not totally think that king is only having a welfaristic perspective, right? Though he believes that yes, the law or the dharma and the law, the Raj Dharma or Rash Dharma, we use the word Raj Dharma actually, or Vyavaharika, the administrative laws, they are the hierarchical laws which will govern the state. And in that process, he also believes that the Raja is also to be regulated by the same law. In fact, Raja's role is to uphold the Dharma as the highest law. And that Dharma, I would say, was a religious Dharma, or you can assume as one ashram dharma. So he has talked about various things, right? Concept of justice, nyaya, niti, dandaniti, right? Establishment of conduct shodhan, criminal, legal, or justice systems, and dharmaniyam, that is the civil system, civil law system. So he has obviously talked about various aspects, right? But on the other hand, when you look at his Mandal theory, or when we understand, or when he talks about elaborate aspects of how to control and centralize power, we also feel that somewhere he believes that the ends are important and not necessarily the means. So Machiavelli and Kautilya can be comparable in that regard. That is what Weber has said. So it is obvious that we cannot totally agree with this statement that yes, ethics in public services was the primary concern. Yes, though control, order, and somewhere regulation of the system was the primary control, right? Though he was talking about ethics as primarily the dharma which is established by the religion or the dharma which is followed by the king, right? So you could have written this idea. That's would be much better answer, because the primary features of Arthashastra are real, politic, and realism. You cannot deny that while you are writing the answer. Fine. So that could have been given you this idea, right? Mughal administration, again, this was exactly the topic we told the students. This is more or less the perennial topic of the UPSC. The Mughal administration by nature was by nature centralized, right? Obviously, the Mughal, the structure, the entire design of the Mughal administration had a kind of monotony, right? That's called the authoritarian monotony. So, what is that authoritarian monotony? There was a centralized despotism, the king, right? Whatever the king may be. So, all these kings somewhere, they themselves projected themselves as the god. When you say you are Zile Alahi or Padshah, right? You are basically trying to say you are the shadow of God, or you are the hand of God, or you are the somewhere the divine stature. So one aspect was that how the power was viewed by them, right? Second, like I said, the authoritarian monotony was there. The power was centralized right from the top to the bottom. This is visible first in the Mansabdari system that was established, mostly the civil and the military being integrated together, right? Thirdly, the structure of the the central the monarch, the controller under the king or the Badsha, right? So the central structure or design of authority was again similar to the provincial, right? And more or less goes down at the lower levels, right? So you had subhas as the provinces and subedar there, right? And then you had districts or sub-district level. You had a shahar kotwal. The kotwal was directly controlled by the central government, that is the king, right? Uh, then Diwan was a very powerful person, right? Central Diwan. He was controlling a lot of financial disbursements to the subas also. Most of the subedars were basically from the kith and kin, again centralized tendency. consanguineous, control. So by blood they were controlled, and because of they were mostly working as the representative of the king, right? And they did not have any independent authority, right? Also, the Mansabdari system created a lot of allegiance and loyalty to the king, because as mansabs were given or estates were given, right? They were not, basically they were not given permanently. They were not transferred to anyone. They were not hereditary in nature. uh, so tankha, or the salary, that was it was called, right? The tankha jagirs which were given, so that also was controlled by the central government. So many of the features, right, whether the control over justice delivery, king being the highest fountain of justice, fine. So whether it was chief qazi or diwan, right, what we say, the prime minister, everybody was technically reporting to the king. There was no independent council which could control the decisions of the king. So throughout the system, you will find that they had a very centralized tendency. Yes, ultimately, the concept of punishment, the concept of punitive measures which were taken, they ultimately indicate that it was authoritarian in nature, and it was not a benevolent system. Even though reforms were initiated, right? Also, the financial system was centralized by Akbar, right? The Zabti system that he developed, total reforms. Uh, when we go at the lower levels, right, Karori Fauzdar, who is the head of the Sarkar, right? So Fotedar, Karori Fauzdar, Sarkar was basically the district that we had, right? And then we had Parganas below that. So if you go below that, right, or Shikdar, and then the villages, you'll find at the lower level, at the village level, this centralization was little, it was missing. Why it was missing? Obviously, because they did not like the village life. They resented that kind of hinterland life. They were mostly comfort-seeking people, right? Or a lot of expenditure was done in terms of luxury and comfort. Obviously, it was a huge system of administration, right? This also somewhere created a kind of monotony and the need for centralization. Being military, everything need to be documented, and that is why it was called Kagzi Raj. As it was Kagzi Raj, it was a kind of bureaucratic system. Fine. So you can write it, though we can say that it's not totally a despotic system, right? There were kings, monarchs who have done a lot of welfare activities, and they also somewhere wanted the riaya, the subjects, to be happy, right? Obviously, they also wanted them to be somewhere, uh, accepting the Raja, the king, as the main head of the system. So somewhere the Rajas tried to, you know, uh, mm, achieve welfare activities. Also, they tried to create sarais. They would try to create a lot of, other welfare measures. But you can say somewhere the authority system that runs within the entire governance, right? That was controlled by few at the top. Fine. So you can write it, right? There were a lot of foreign elements, as you know, concept of bazaars, right? A revenue system, then the powers of the king, and the kind of stature they created of the king and the monarch. So definitely, you cannot say it was a purely rule of law system or it was a very fair system and it was a participative model. It was not. So you can write it. Fine. Autonomy to PSU is a myth. Yes, obviously, we cannot totally agree, but yes, to an extent, we can agree. When you think of the reforms in India, right, started since long time. So most of the, as you know, PSUs were designed. You can start with the idea, right, because that is the importance or that is the utility of this question. So PSUs were basically designed for what? Based on the democratic socialism as a constitutional philosophy that we follow. So as we follow the democratic socialism, it is quite obvious that we would like to establish, right, somewhere a kind of state control over resources, right? State control over resources. The primary purpose would be that also the government can redistribute the resource. Also, because it was quite obvious that we were not having a high growth rate, we were having an increasing population, the very basic amenities and services were missing, the administration was colonial, So we could not have trusted that. We wanted import substitution. We wanted to be independent in terms of food security, in terms of agrarian reforms, in terms of what you can say the various sectors of economy, right? So that was the idea why we created it. Obviously, we cannot write all of that, but let's put it in few words, right? So that is why 10 markers become very important. If you have conceptual clarity and you are very clear about what exactly is the idea, then you can write the 10 markers much better. Fine. So redistribute, right? Obviously, coupled with the idea of Nehruvian planning, right? Or Nehruvian model of planning. So Nehruvian planning was inspired by the idea of democratic socialism. Fine. So you can write this idea first and then come to that the need for creating PSUs emerges because of that. So we had a centralized planning system, and obviously to achieve those goals of planning, we needed to have the commercial functions performed by the state. These commercial functions were not totally commercial because one of the primary targets of these PSUs or establishment of the PSUs, whether CPSUs or state PSUs, was to achieve the welfare, development, right, and redistribution of this growth or development to the every corner of the society. So one of the primary purpose of the PSUs was not to commercially create profits, but to reduce the regional imbalances that existed in India, right? Fine. In that sense, we created variety of structures for PSUs, right? Corporations, company, statutory corporations, right? And today, obviously, we are creating SPVs or different models, PPPs. We are going for different type of approaches today, right? So we had created these PSUs, right? Initially as departmental model. You understand what is a departmental model? The departmental model is where it is created directly as part of the department or the ministry under the control of a minister and the bureaucrat. For example, railways, right? Air India, right? They were all basically departmental form of PSUs. So you have first the creation of PSUs, the process, right? So government owns, and that somewhere is a red, right, mark against the PSU's autonomy, right? So government owns them. The initial corpus, the initial funds given by the governments, right? So initial investment is basically of the government. Government holds obviously a major stake in these PSUs. Basically, the owner is the government. Now, government, when I say, is the ministry and the secretariat, that is the bureaucracy. They also somewhere, or they were also the members of the board. In fact, the ministers were the chairmen of the board initially. So they were also the members of the board which governs this PSU. Fine. So infiltration of the ministers, their representatives or the bureaucrats in that. Then the human resource policy, employment policies, various other policies under which these PSUs used to work, that was also controlled by the ministry. Even today also it is done by the ministry. I would not say completely, but yes, political influences cannot be reduced. Fine. Air India you have seen, BSNL you have seen, TRI again, and many of these bodies, right, whether they are regulatory bodies or they are PSUs, both are somewhere infiltrated by the political system. Fine. Then, obviously, the need for reforms come. So, 1980, 91, sorry, the Narsimhan Committee reform. 98 again, Narsimhan 2. Fine. Then 1996, Disinvestment Commission was created. Later on, a lot of effort obviously was done by the Vajpayee government also, 99 onwards, Geeta Krishnan Committee. And then 2010 Roongta Committee. Uh, then you'll see later on you have seen 2012, then second ARC. So many committees have highlighted that there is lack of financial autonomy, even today also, to a large extent, right? Beyond the point the government's control is or approval is necessary, right? Then budgetary controls of the government. Most of these PSUs are working under the ministry. Bureaucratic influences, right? Even the appointments today at the top levels is done by PSEB, Public Sector Enterprises Board. That is the body which appoints the chairmen or the board members of the PSUs. They are again controlled by the ministry. Fine. Then, in terms of, you can say, internal policy management, right? The CEO or the heads, their chairmen have a lot of influence. Earlier, the chairmen mostly were coming from the bureaucracy. Even today, also there are many. But now, the PSUs have been at least somewhere separated from this influence of bureaucracy. Then 97 onwards, we have seen some change in form of MOU system introduced, right? Arjun Sen Gupta committee, so MOU system was introduced. Memorandum of understanding somewhere provided uh, an opportunity for autonomy to this, right? Later on, as you know, Rungta committee has also talked about creating a sovereign wealth fund where surplus of the PSUs can be invested by themselves. So you could have brought these perspectives, and based on that, right, we could have highlighted the idea that yes, somewhere the autonomy of the PSUs have been compromised in the past, and to a large extent, right, many of the PSUs today also are facing the same crisis in terms of the bureaucratic control. But right, because of now the greater autonomy which they are enjoying in terms of classification, Maharatnas, Navratnas, and many Ratnas, fine, in terms of the autonomy in terms of capital expenditure, autonomy in terms of investment, right? And likewise, but still, the primary purpose of PSU remains the same. They are still treated as one of the cash cows for the government, or they are still treated as one of the welfare, oriented systems. Take a look at the public sector banks, right? You'll understand. So, how a burden of subsidy shifted to a public sector bank, right? So, a lot of or Air India following unnecessary non-commercial routes because of the influence of the government. So many of these PSUs have faced this crisis, and obviously the time has come now to move into the next generation of the PSU reforms, right? Which definitely will make them more commercially viable and probably more competitive, considering the private sector or market mechanism. So you could have written it. Obviously, it's not much of scope here, right? But still, if you bring these perspectives, that would be fine. 1D. This is a statement by our Prime Minister. It should be People's Prime Minister office. It can't be Prime Minister's office, right? So exact statement we have used in the class itself. If students are listening, they will probably remember. So our Prime Minister's view, no doubt, we can agree this is a adequate statement which should be there. But how does it reflect the people's will? Obviously, Prime Minister's office under the transaction of business rules, right, is a kind of department. It's like you can say department of the government. It functions somewhere independently of the other bodies because it is created specially to protect or promote or to provide the value addition, advisory, deliberative, right, information based role to the Prime Minister. As you know, we are a parliamentary system and we are a Westminster model. There's a cabinet form of government, right? And so we generally look at government as collective, right? But in spite of that, Prime Minister has been given a position of preeminence by the Constitution. It is the Prime Minister who appoints all the other ministers. So, Prime Minister, irrespective of being the part of the collective, right, has to have its own identity. And that is why we say de facto the power lies with the Prime Minister. That is, the de facto executive is the PM, right, and not the President. So PMO justifies this idea, first of all. Secondly, PMO has gone through various phases, as you know, under Nehru, or for that matter, Lal Bahadur Shastri or Indira Gandhi, where there was a lot of centralization within PMO, even Rahul Gandhi's era. Then emergency era, as you know, the prime ministerial influence over the entire government, right? Cabinet was undermined. Then again, various bureaucrats who got associated with PMO. So PMO has a typical structure which is headed by a principal secretary to the Prime Minister and additional principal secretaries, joint secretaries. So it also has an elaborate structure and it performs various functions. So primary function of the PMO is that it is to serve the needs of the Prime Minister, right? Both political needs and what you will say informational needs for the Prime Minister, secretarial assistance to the Prime Minister, and likewise, right? So how it will be now People's Prime Minister? So many times it has been found out that PMO is highly centralized and works in a more opaque manner compared to other organizations, because it is prominently controlled by the Prime Minister and obviously his closest people, right? You can say that PMOs were basically working as the kitchen cabinets for the PM. So this idea and powerful prime ministers, as you know, today or in, in the past, we have strong prime ministers with charismatic influence. They have obviously virtually made the PMO a super cabinet, a powerful body, or you can say the cabinet of the cabinet, and likewise. So the question obviously is based on this idea. Obviously, you cannot write all of that. I'm just giving you an idea so that you could use some points. If you had written, good. Fine. So how it is now emerging that way, right? So obviously today what we are doing, we are working towards making it more accessible to the people. Man Ki Baat, one. mygov.in, second, right? Various schemes, Ujjwala Yojana, right? Or what is that? Jan Aushadhi Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Jan Aushadhi Yojana, or PM Gati Shakti, or for that matter, you can say the direct interface which the PMO or the Prime Minister is trying to create with the people. Pragati, okay, proactive governance and timely implementation. So there are various aspects of governance today, which where the PMO is playing an outrightly direct role, okay, obviously through with the guidance and influence of the Prime Minister. This has both positive and negative aspects. So it should be people's PMO, correct? No doubt. The Prime Minister is the representative of the people, right? We are a democracy, and obviously Prime Minister has his obligation not only towards his Council of Minister or towards the legislature, but also towards the people. Also, like we said, I said the emergence of the charismatic era for the Prime Ministers. So, social media and many other things have impacted it. But now you can write the flip side also. So if PMO becomes too powerful, the position of the cabinet secretary or cabinet secretariat reduces. Individual ministries' role reduces. The idea of collective, functioning or collective responsibility may be undermined. Prime ministerial influence over, decision making. PMO working as technically the policy making body rather than the cabinet, right? So there could be negative aspects also. Fine. So we could always say that the balance between the so-called legitimate institutions like cabinet secretariat or secretariat and the prime minister office must be developed so that, right, the sense of what we call today in theory, we use the term whole of government approach can be used here. Fine. So you can write it. That could have been enough. If you have written in a particular order, that would have been a good answer. Fine. National Data Analysis Platform. Obviously, this is lack of creativity. But yes, we can say that considering the topics like digital era governance, e-governance, fine, and primarily the obsession of UPSC with Niti Aayog, this could be accepted as fine. So this was nothing. If you had studied GS properly, you could have written it. As you know, it was launched in 2022. The primary purpose was to provide an open data platform. That's the idea. So open data platform. So you could have started with, there is, the starting of the answer should have been obviously the increasing role of technology in administration. How in that sense the Niti Aayog has emerged as an important platform of providing policy analysis and policy collaboration between the union and states. Then third would have been obviously in this context, Niti Aayog has come up with this. Why? Because see, data, availability of data and data management, right, is a big issue. Also, access to data is a big problem. So see, this platform provides data, open data, obviously to people, technically to state governments, to university scholars, to researchers, to governments, to bureaucrats, all those stakeholders who are involved in policy formulation. Fine. So how this platform is going to promote? Now that was the actual question. So you could have written about this, what this platform is, how it provides a robust ecosystem, data security, data fidelity, right? Access to data, retrieval, and something called management information system, MIS approach to the data, use of data, right? So how data was centralized, how it could be distributed, how it could be accessed, how it could be made more democratic in terms of, policy making. Data reliability is a big issue, right? So these things are achieved by this process, right? Now the next part would have been definitely to promote. So how does it promote a better policy making or implementation, evaluation, and feedback? That is one very important aspect. So, see, the biggest issue in the era of social media or in the era of technology is what? The reliability of data, the procurement of the correct, authentic data, and then verification of that data, and somewhere the use of that data for making decisions. That is the idea. Today we are in the phase of something called evidence-based policy making. We are, though we cannot say we are totally into that, right? But yes, the use of AI and technologies in future would make the policy making and decision making more reliable and authentic in nature. So the failure ratio of the policies, right, would be minimized. Now that was the question. So how inclusivity, because it is involving several stakeholders. Now, who are these stakeholders? You can write, because if you understood paper one's logic of good governance, multi-state actor, or governance is a multi-actor paradigm, you know all that. So obviously you can use it. And secondly, today the policy formulation or the policy process is multi-actor, multi-sectoral. See, they are managing data for different sectors. Ministry of Commerce with Niti Aayog and many other ministries today have associated and brought multiple data related to diverse sectors on this platform. So that can be like one-stop shop for the data retrieval, analysis, access, and use, right? So you can write, with increasing role of the technology in policy making, definitely this is one very convenient, what you can say, platform or system for distributing data and maintaining data fidelity and integrity throughout the policy process. And that is the answer. You could also, because it is a 20 marker, you can bring the other perspective that how in future it could be improved. Data security, very important aspect, right? Like you say, digital disparity or digital divide is another important issue. Then reliable data, that's a very important. We are in the age of social media. We are in this phase of something called the post-truth phase, right? So post-truth phase is, there is no truth actually. Everybody has its own interpretation. So in that sense also reliable data is very important. You know how recently controversies were visible in the functioning of the recent governments, right? Obviously, governments are blaming each other in terms of data. Fine. And also, you can say that there were certain agencies, right, who had, where the heads resigned because of, the what you can say, the controversy between the government and these institutions regarding the data which was released, right? If you remember, the data related to ODF, the open defecation free claim of the government, right? So obviously, this is also very important that whether the data which is available, right, what are the sources of the collection of the data, what has been the method of survey, right, and whether this data has been acquired through the transparent and fair means. So in future, these issues will also emerge, and they are already the issues. Fine. To maintain a robust data system, we need to look into those factors as well. Fine. So you could have written, that would have been a very good answer, especially from the governance perspective, the Pub Ad perspective. Fine. Then usual questions you'll find. See, let's take this one. Again, interesting. Examine the impact on administration in view of changing relations between political and permanent executive. Some questions are, they never lose the essence of the paper, right? So political and permanent executive, as you know, you have topics like bureaucracy and democracy, minister civil servant relationship, right? Obviously, this relationship has been controversial since long time. The constitutional premise. So start with the constitutional premise, right? Whether you talk about 74 articles, 75, 78, right? Or part 14, articles 308 to 315 or 323, right? So you could talk about, fine, start with this, that what exactly is the constitutional scheme or constitutional vision for the bureaucracy and democracy, or bureaucracy and political system relationship. So we have two models, or we can say we have two types of executives, permanent and political, right? You can start with that. So what is the nature of relationship which is visualized? One part of the executive is the one which is ministerial, political, and it will have democratic control over administration. Administration is considered to be more a non-political part, non-elected part, and so it is a permanent system which has certain more or less features, right? Tenurial security, then you can say the implementation role, most of the administrative functions, delegation of power and authority, right? Role in terms of monitoring, supervising, executing, public interface, and so many other roles it has. On the other hand, the ministry has different roles. So power is divided between the minister and the civil servant. Fine. So from this you could have started. Now, so how this nature is changing? Now, first ARC, second ARC, both have talked about these ideas. In the beginning itself, Sardar Patel had given a statement that, okay, I expect fairness, I expect straight, right, and fair relationship or communication with my secretaries. So the secretaries must be willing to render impartial advice to the ministers, and ministers must also be willing to allow the secretary a fearless environment in which they can speak. Now, this was the idea of Sardar Patel, as you know, how he had visualized the important role for civil services. But what has happened of late? Obviously, the issues which have emerged, right? If you take Wilson's perspective, Wilson had conceived of dichotomy exactly for the same reason. Why dichotomy? For the same reason, because he believed that there was excessive politicization, right? Or the use of power, politicking for self-interest. Your theory of public choice approach has explored again the same thing. How politics and bureaucracy form a nexus. Niskanen is a scholar who uses the term bilateral monopoly. What is the bilateral monopoly? The nexus between them. So first ARC, Vohra Committee 1993, Santhanam Committee 1964, first ARC 1966, second ARC 2005, and likewise. Various committees have already explored the idea that how this relationship can be improved. So there has to be a clear cut, like second ARC says, there has to be a clear distinction, a dichotomy between policy formulator and policy implementer. Even though policy process may require the involvement of both, right? But it should be purely, strictly professional in nature. Minister's role should be to act on the aid and advice of the executive or civil servants, right? And civil servants role must be to provide impartial data and analysis to the minister. The minister must not impose his ideology on the civil servant, right? And somewhere the civil servants must not be willing to personally, benefit the minister. So you can bring the various perspectives which are there, would have been more easy. So you have politicking, you have politicization, you have nexus, right? You have somewhere political interference in day to day, right? So how this nature is changing now? Obviously, because we are seeing corruption, a lot of corruption happening, right? Uh, one of the major reasons for corruption has been the lack of accountability in administration. Why this lack of accountability? Because obviously the political system and the bureaucracy are in relation with each other. Fine. Though of late this scenario is changing a lot because of social media, because of presence of technology, right? You've seen the bureaucratic or civil services activism emerging, bureaucratic populism emerging. They are becoming very popular. They are directly having an interface with the people. Amendments to the IT Act and civil services conduct rules, they indicate all that. Then doctrine of pleasure with the president, or the pleasure doctrine controls the functions of the civil servants, right? Their service conditions are controlled by the government. So the creation of civil services board as visualized by second ARC, which has been done by many states for transfer, promotion, for various service conditions, involvement of UPSC, and likewise. So we are witnessing a change in the nature of relationship. In fact, we can say that corruption has increased, no doubt, but to a large extent, the sense of accountability, right, a sense of responsibility of the bureaucracy has also increased, especially the impact of RTI, impact of citizen charters, social audit, decentralization of power to the local bodies. So a lot of changes in terms of relationship is taking place. Point. And even you can say the grassroots democracy has also changed this scenario. We are seeing the emergence of the local leadership, the political leadership at the local levels, right? And they are also impacting the administration in some way, constructive manner, at least not negative. Negative consequences also there, but let's explore more constructive aspect. Fine. So you can see better accountability, more scrutiny, citizens' access to the information policy, and likewise, right? Also, as second ARC has itself you know recommended for the changing the oath of the civil servants to oath of transparency from the oath of secrecy, right? Or you can say the risk profiling of bureaucrats in terms of how corrupt they can be. So there are a lot of measures which we can take, which in future will improve the minister civil servant or political executive and permanent executive relationship, right? Capacity building, training, curriculum changes, recruitment changes, a lot of things can be done which in future will improve it. But yes, definitely there is a need for the independent bodies, civil services law, as it is practiced in France and many European countries. Even Britain, UK, made the civil services law in 2007. So, second ARC had recommended for a civil services law, full-fledged civil services law, which was proposed in India in 2013, but obviously it could not be implemented. So, we can make a civil services law which would provide uniformity across the civil services. We have already CAT and SAT, right? Article 323A, 323B. So, all that can go a long way in promoting better political executive and permanent executive relationship. Fine. That is the answer you could have written. Decentralized planning enhances economic development and social justice. Fine. Simple idea. It is a perpetual question, right? Decentralized planning. So what exactly is planning? You can start from there and then talk about how we had centralized planning under Planning Commission, how Planning Commission created problems for governance, right, or cooperative federalism, or fiscal federalism, or impacting the local level planning. Also, as per the recommendation of second ARC or many other committees, you would say, but second ARC comes more prominently, the idea of, right, principle of subsidiarity. So principle of subsidiarity should have been used. Principle of solidarity, subsidiarity, basically urban local bodies and likewise. So principle of subsidiarity, which says that the power should be exercised at the lowest level. As far as possible, majority of the developmental functions should be performed at the lowest level. So the higher levels of government must perform minimum functions, and that too only strategic in nature. Now this obviously promotes the spirit of decentralization. So demise of planning commission, emergence of Niti Aayog, right? Focus on decentralized planning, or what we say micro level planning, or planning at micro spaces. This is also the idea. So we focused, or we started moving towards that. Obviously, this was made quite effective by the democratic decentralization through the Panchayati Raj institutions. So how that moves it to now, obviously we have Gram Sabha, Gram Panchayat, GPDP, Gram Panchayat development plans, or the committee of the Gram Panchayat, right? Then we have planning at the block level, right? But there's a missing link, but that is not the question here. So we have planning at the block level, we have planning at the Zilla Parishad level, right? Especially 243D, right? The DPC, formation of DPC and MPC. Metropolitan Planning Committee and District Planning Committee, right? Also, the reducing role of the district collector and the administration, the reduced role of the DRDA, District Rural Development Agency, they have also enhanced the decentralized planning, right? So how this planning is made, it is done. Fine, though it is 10 marks, you cannot write that much, but still you start with the idea. Principle of subsidiarity is key, right? Micro level planning is key. Fine. So how this planning is necessary and how this planning is transforming the rural development, right? So you can say as 243G, 243W articles, the effective role given to these bodies for planning at the local level, right? So what is the primary role of these bodies or local bodies is to make plans for socio-economic development of the local areas and to implement the plans for socio-economic development of local areas, right? So this way you start, this way you try to further take up the idea and talk about how decentralized planning is going to improve the local participation, how women-centric schemes can be implemented, how women participation has become crucial, how around 2.5 lakh gram panchayats, they are functioning so well, not everything, but yeah, they are functioning well in terms of mobilization of people, mobilization of mass, in terms of nurturing political leadership or leadership ability at the local level, right? Andhra, you can say Haryana, UP, then your this Kerala, and many other states, even northeastern states, you'll find that there are several data, right, which supports that how women participation is increasing drastically, how women leadership is emerging at lower levels. Though again, it is fraught with various issues. Secretary RC itself says that democratic decentralization has not led to, or decentralization has not led to democratization. So decentralization is not equal to democratization, which itself means that somewhere, right, the local bodies or at the local level, the caste, the community, the religion, the traditional power structure, the elites, okay, they still have a lot of influence and control over the autonomy of these bodies. Elections were not conducted properly, right? Fair elections are not conducted. Money is entering, muscle is entering into panchayat elections. It is considered to be a very viable position now, with a lot of money flowing in for development. So you could highlight these aspects also, that there are challenges and obstructions to the planning mechanism. Fine. The role of State Finance Commission in distribution of finances between central and state local governments. Vital, obviously, 243I. Fine. 243Y. IY. That's IY. For municipal bodies and for rural local bodies, right? Finance Commission is, except 3-4 states, most of the states have now constituted Finance Commission. This must be the report of the Finance Commission in many states should have been basically now the 5th generation reports, right? It was supposed to be created somewhere in 1994-95. But many of the 5th generation means now it would be the 5th term report given by these finance commissions. But many of these states are still in the 3rd phase report or 3rd stage report, that is what is known. They have not made more than 3 reports till now. Most of the states were not constituting this, even though this is a mandatory provision, right? But because governor has a role, and then obviously the influence of CM and CMO on the governor is another aspect, right? In terms of this functioning. So state government has a lot of dominance in this. In fact, the recommendation of the second ARC that State Finance Commission and Central Finance Commission must be formed together so that a coordination can be established, right? So you can talk about what is the role of the State Finance Commission, disbursement or distribution. It recommends to the Central Finance Commission the ways and means and the resources needed to augment the finances of the local bodies. It also suggests the state government in terms of providing more functions to the local bodies and in terms of providing more ways or sources for the revenue. Also grants in aid from the consolidated fund of the state, right? It can also specifically suggest things related to or the resources and assets which are needed in relation to the various programs and schemes which are being implemented. right? It can also somewhere give suggestions. That is the mandate. It can be done by the state government, right, on the PPP projects, right, specifically which are impacting the rural areas or rural development programs. So it has lot of mandate. It can give suggestions and deliberations, right? Three-member body can be constituted. Finance Commission chairmen are appointed by the governors, but most of them are bureaucrats. Most of these states had not constituted it, right? Of late, that means around 15 years after the enactment of the act, many states had not constituted the state finance commissions. It doesn't work, or it is not able to work in tandem with the Central Finance Commission. There is lack of regularity and punctuality in the State Finance Commission, bureaucratized and politicized. Fine. Lack of resources with the states, that is also one big issue. Right. So, with the change in the stance of the 14th Finance Commission and 15th Finance Commission, you can say now, obviously, these bodies are playing an effective role. And in fact, if we constitute them along with the Central Finance Commission, that would be much better. You've seen how many states are still demanding for the backward status, or the special status, you can say. And it is basically because the states are not able to keep up with the level of development and the level of complexities that have been created because of various factors today in governance. FRBM is already in place, right? Fiscal Responsibility and Budgetary Management Act 2003. So many of the states, GST is already in place. So many of the states are also finding somewhere restriction in terms of financial freedom, right? Or fiscal freedom, the term we can use. So you can bring that perspective also and say that States Finance Commission, right, how it will augment the resources of the local bodies, so it has a very effective role to play in that regard if it is made somewhere at par with the Central Finance Commission, right, which is formed under Article 280. So if that is done, that would be better. Fine. Then third B, center-state relations undergoing a drastic change. Kindly, this is a very usual question. Write about it, talk about federalism. It is a 20-mark question. Talk about federalism, the nature. Fine. So, talk about federalism. Talk about the changing nature or the nature of federalism in Indian context. Fine. Cooperative, fiscal, competitive, cumulative. You can use them because it's a 20-mark question. So you can talk about the changing dynamics of federalism in India, competitive federalism by Niti Aayog, demise of Planning Commission. So see how these relations are changing. Planning Commission is no more. Niti Aayog has come up. Fiscal federalism, the nature of fiscal federalism has changed, right? GST has been implemented. GST has drastically impacted the fiscal or cooperative federalism which was there. Issues like terrorism, Naxalism, internal security, border disputes, they somewhere also create, somewhere need for a better center-state coordination, formation of NIA, right? Central police organizations, disaster management. So many of these areas, right? They have somewhere changed the way center-state relations are working. Also, when you talk about the emergence of coalition politics, the emergence of the trend of coalition politics, right? For time being, for 10 years almost, it was not visible, but again, it has resurfaced, right? We are in that era itself. We cannot deny that. So, the impact of the coalition politics and somewhere, the role of the governor and the nature of relationship impacted by it, or you can say a party at the center and many of the state government, right? This is also again changing the nature of center-state relation. You've seen what has happened in the GST Council, right? Many of the members who are not governed by the party at the center, they don't feel comfortable and secured in the discussions and the decisions of the GST Council, which is a constitutional body, right? So you can say that, yes, the nature is changing, and this nature is changing primarily because of the factors which have come. But obviously, in brief, first start with the basic idea of federalism and why federalism is inevitable in the Indian context, right? You can talk about. Then, yes, local government's emergence, principle of subsidiarity you can use. That is why I said this paper seems like that it's a very easy paper, lot of repetition, right? In the paper to syllabus also a lot of repetition, and technically in the question paper also. Fine. So drastic, focus on the word drastic, obviously. It may be good, it may be bad. You need not always write good things, but yes, the nature of relationship is impacted by primary factors, right? Many of the primary factors. Okay. Fine. Again, same usual question. There has been a strain in relations between government and state governments in the recent past. This has been there since long time. When we talk about Sarkaria Commission on Center-State Relations, Sri Krishna Commission, or when you talk about the SR Bombay case, Navam Brebia case, and various other cases. GNCTD versus Union of India, right? National Capital of Territory of Delhi and Union of India. So every case which is related to this, in fact, the use of governor's position has been controversial since the beginning, especially after the demise of Nehru, 1964. In the post-Nehruvian era, we find the controversy related to governor's position. So in this question, the basic 10 marker, definitely you should simply write, right, what is the position of governor in the Indian Constitution? The constitutional position, obviously, he is not the lieutenant governor, or he is not technically the governor general. He is also not the governor of the British era. He is little distinct from that. Why the role is important? Fine. In fact, there was a debate that why not governor be elected in the Constituent Assembly. So obviously, an elected governor would have created again a big problem. Two heads, political heads of the state. So what is the idea of governor, role of governor? What should be the role of governor as recommended by Sarkaria Commission, Punchi Commission 2009-10? Many of these committees have recommended the governor's role to be constructive. Recent Supreme Court directive with respect to Tamil Nadu's governor, same, or in terms of governor's role, right, in reserving the bills for the consideration of president, Article 201 or 200, 201, right? So you can bring these perspectives that there has been controversies, right? But yes, with the recommendations as proposed by second ARC or Sarkaria Commission, which further was taken up by Punchi Commission, somewhere the role of the governor must be more constructive. In union territories, also the controversy is equally visible, right? So you can write this idea and suggest that, okay, what can be done, making the governor not a person who is not politically active. But at the same time, governors, most of the bureaucrats are being appointed as governors who are pets of the union government. That is also something, a drawback. Fine, governor's position is mostly a trophy position. It's more like a cosmetic position, right? Probably whether there is a need for a governor itself or not, that is also a kind of debatable issue. Fine, you might find it next year in the mains. Need for governor's position, that itself is a issue. Fine. So you can write these things. Not need to go into detail of judgments and all that because it's just 10 markers. Basic idea and some specific examples will be enough to write this question. PSU's undertakings have been the bedrock of welfare in India. Evaluate the pros and cons of current disinvestment scenario. Kindly write this question. What is big deal about it? Right? Disinvestment policy, disinvestment commission, 1996 onwards started. Right? And how the nature of disinvestment and the formation of ministry or department of disinvestment, ministry of disinvestment, and then how 99, 2000 onwards this entire scenario changed. Obviously, today also government is exceeding its disinvestment targets, right? BIFR, or for that matter, the formation of the National Investment Fund, NIF, and likewise. So you can talk about the basic things, how this investment scenario has improved the LPG or the impact of the LPG era. Obviously, this disinvestment scenario, right, has to be looked into the greater, broader perspective of the role of PSUs in welfare, subsidies, justice, rural development, or certain developments or priority sector lending. So we have to look into that aspect also, right? So how this investment scenario could be managed or balanced with the actual role of the PSUs, that is to be written here. Find recent change in the orientation of the government, strategic disinvestment. You can talk about PPPs. You can talk about, right, annuity model. You can talk about, and various type of models of infrastructure development, right? Public-private partnerships, issues arising out of that, accountability, auditing. You can write about all these things. That will make up the answer. That's easy, right? Raising revenue by the piece. So you can write them. Okay. Fourth, be again, collegium system of appointments to higher judiciary has been the cornerstone of independence of judiciary. Yes, to an extent, correct, as the subject of debates in recent past, right? So as you know, 124 or 217 articles, they are dealing with the appointments of judges of the higher judiciary. As you know, right, we had, obviously, this government, India government had created, enacted, in fact, the National Judicial Appointments Committee or Commission, which was struck down by the judiciary later, right, as against the basic structure doctrine. The idea is that judicial review is the part of basic structure, and that is true, fine. But in what way the judicial review gets hampered by the National Judicial Appointment Commission? Now see, so collegium system has its own problems. Three judges case, right, and the changing nature or the increasing power of the judiciary. How the collegium system or collegium increased to 5 CGI plus 4 judges of his choice, obviously senior most judges. How the appointment from basically from the consultation of the Chief Justice or the court to the concentration of the Chief Justice and the court, right? See, so from consultation to concentration, how this has moved from the first judge's case to the third judge's case, right? And then obviously the collegium, the striking down the collegium, striking down the NJC, right? So how collegiums have become powerful, right? Obviously, the controversies are related to that. Collegium systems seem to be highly opaque in nature. There are no minutes of the meetings of these decisions which are taken. It is concentrated under judiciary, which qualifies to be something called self-recruitment or conflict of interest. It is promoting lack of transparency within the judicial system. Lobbying has become very influential in this. No role for the executive as visualized by the Constitution under Article 124 or 217. So as visualized by the Constitution, no role of the executive is involved or there in the appointment of judges. Fine. But in spite of all these controversies and debates that have happened, right, Second ARC also had talked about National Judicial Council, creating a mechanism of accountability and standards for the judges, right, and improving the provisions of the Judges Inquiry Act 1968. So, a lot of issues are there in terms of corruption, judicial opaqueness, judiciary not being under RTI in that sense, a lot of administrative functions of the judiciary away from the executive control, right? So we need what? We do not need, we need judicial, what you can say, somewhere review or judicial autonomy. We do not need judicial exclusivity, fine? So there's a difference between judicial autonomy and judicial exclusivity. That is something not good. Judicial intervention is fine, judicial review is fine, but not judicial adventurism or judicial excessism or judicial encroachment, whatever we say. So we can write this perspective that these debates center around, right, controversies which have come, whether you talk about West Bengal State Human Rights Commission chief, right, he was the judge, Justice Ganguly, Justice Nirmal Yadav, and likewise a lot of other controversies may have been there, fine, but as of now, the role of executive is quite restricted, right? Only in terms of the removal of judges, maybe some role of the legislature is there. And that too also is a big issue. Fine, because that will lose the trust in the judiciary. So if we make judiciary more transparent, and judiciary's aspiration to become part of the executive goes down, because that is also very important. Judges want to be governors, judges want to be something, so that is also not acceptable. Fine. So you can write about the debates and the issues. Fine. Fourth C, this is also very interesting question. This is again usual question, bureaucracy and democracy. Fine. The concept of bureaucratic authoritarianism is one of the models of non-democratic rules. See? Simply, it's a debate between bureaucracy, the nature of bureaucracy, and democracy. Talk about first the features of both, how the features of bureaucracy and democracy seem to be contradictory to each other, right? Bureaucracy is hierarchical, democracy is participative. So write about the features, right? In fact, Weber himself had somewhere visualized the excessive bureaucratization, and that is why he suggested to control bureaucracy by representative democracy. The four ways by which he talks about controlling the bureaucracy. So start with this basic idea, right? And why this concern? This concern is because the bureaucracy is enjoying excessive power, excessive authority, especially after the increasing phenomena of delegated legislation or increasing administrative law, the domain of administrative law in India and many developing countries of the world. So that is also the primary concern. So how bureaucracy encroaches upon democracy, that is on one issue. How democracy becomes ineffective in control of bureaucracy, that is also another perspective. So we have asymmetry of power logic, right? We have experts versus non-experts power, or experts versus layman. We have what we call the principal agent model to explain it. The bureaucrats are the agents hired by the principal, that is the government, who is in turn hired by the principal, the people. See, so we can use principal agent model also to explain this idea, right? And then public choice perspective is there, Riggs analysis is there. See how bureaucracy somewhere undermines the spirit of democracy in many developing societies. Salacracy, the idea he uses. So there could be many ways of expressing the same answer, fine, but you could have written more clearly, bringing some theoretical aspect that Weber himself was quite conscious, right? Why he was conscious? Because of these reasons. So how we can overcome the drawbacks and the authoritarian, right? Or the nature of the authority, the power system that we create within bureaucracy. So it is necessary, yes. There is need for administrative power. We are facing a lot of complexities of development, welfare, justice, security, and many issues. So authoritarian power is needed, but how can it be restricted in terms of arbitrariness, in terms of discretion, in terms of misuse of authority? That is important. So how it can be done? Again, you can write about these things, right? You can give examples also. But like I said, it is 10 markers, no need to do all that. Fifth, the constitutional stature provided to the PSCs according the autonomy to work towards fair recruitment. Kindly simply talk about, take UPSC as an example, right? You can talk about how the constitutional position of UPSC protects it from the unnecessary political interference. So whether it is appointment, right, or whether it is the protection of tenure, whether it is the respect and the dignity that is maintained, they cannot be appointed to any other position, right, except for the public service commissions. Then also the salary, perks, privileges, and other conditions which are non-votable part of the budget. So they have been given various, their very important role played in the management of the civil services, especially related to punishment, transfers, or even not transfers, but let's say postings and promotions and punishments. So UPSC or State Public Service Commission has role in that point. Their appointment, right, removal. So many of the provisions in the Constitution make the PSCs or Public Service Commissions highly protected, constitutionally respected, and at the same time the autonomy in this is maintained. But how, again, why they are not functioning? You have seen corruption in most of the state public service commissions. How ex-bureaucrats or the previous bureaucrats who are appointed to these services somewhere work in the political interest, and likewise. So you can just highlight that Constitution provides for effective autonomy, but then again, because of politicization and the loopholes in the system, they are able to misuse, or they are able to misuse the powers which they should have used for the public interest. So you can write this answer. Civil seva, the neutrality of civil services has become a myth. right? Is it true? Politicization? Yes. Activism? Yes. So neutrality is the virtue of civil services. Neutrality, why it is a myth? Why? Positive, negative. Though meaning of myth may be more negative sense, but it cannot be totally true. Neutrality is still there. The bureaucrats take the oath of secrecy. The bureaucrats take the oath of public service, right? Protecting the constitution. The bureaucrats work in a non-political context. That is, they are working in an administrative system. They are controlled by civil services rules, conduct rules, code of ethics as recommended by second ARC, not implemented as of now effectively, right? So it works in a free and fair environment as far as possible, right? The problem arises when we find that the bureaucracy or civil services and the political system relationship goes beyond the professional relationship. Fine. It may be because of nature of function. It may be because of sharing of power. It may be vote bank politics. It may be the self-interest of the civil servants, deteriorating culture of the bureaucracy. T.N. Chaturvedi, right? The ex-cabinet secretary and very popular civil servant, right? In his book Contemporary Administrative Culture in India, which was published by Indian Institute of Public Administration (IIPM), he has talked about the changing culture, administrative culture of Indian civil services. So he talks about a lot of people are having climbers or opportunist culture. Most of the bureaucrats depict the fence sitter culture. That means they sit on the fences, they observe corruption, they don't participate maybe in corruption, but they don't do anything about it. Then there are opportunists and climbers who do everything in the system to get the opportunity and the benefit. You have recent cases of recruitment, recent cases of selection of many of the civil servants through underhand means. You know that. So obviously, neutrality is being violated because of several factors which should not have been there. Neutrality would have ensured equality. Neutrality would have ensured a political role. Neutrality would have ensured that bureaucrats are not ideologically biased. It would also ensure that they will give free, fair assessment of the decisions of the government. They will evaluate them impartially, right? So it would have provided a lot of benefits. That is true. But on the other hand, neutrality is also giving way because of certain positive aspects, right? Bureaucrats seem to be more committed. The concept of committed bureaucracy, activism, right? Social media, or somewhere working in the public interest, irrespective of political pressure, right? Bureaucratic populism, public interface with the bureaucracy is increasing, and bureaucrats are now being becoming popular because of their welfare activities which they are pursuing, out of the box activities which they are pursuing, right? Whether it is people's road, for example, right? uh, Made by the bureaucrat, right, in the northeast. So and like Armstrong Palme, right? People's Road, or likewise. So many of the initiatives the bureaucrats have taken, they have truly created, they have truly influenced their citizen-centric orientation. Because of that, also neutrality is being violated. So don't write only in negative sense, also use the positive perspective. Examine the role of TRI in protecting the interests of consumer. That's a regulatory body, right? Statutory body, why it is created, what is the purpose. As you know, spectrum allocation, and there were issues with Telecom Regulatory Authority of India. So how does it function as a regulatory body, as a quasi-judicial body, right? As a spectrum allocating body. Recently, there was controversy and issues related to that, right? Uh, that how they are defining the spectrum, how they are allocating the spectrum, right? How various telecom agencies or various private companies are trying to influence the pricing, right? And likewise, so Supreme Court had to intervene in that. So this question might have come basically because of that. TRI is also one favorite topic of the UPSC. So you can write it: consumers' interest, regulation, protection of consumers' interest, pricing, right? Monopolizing, oligopolies, mergers and acquisitions. It controls many of the things related to telecom. Right? Enforcing interest, public interest, call drop issue. So there were a lot of issues with which the regulatory policy is developed by TRI. Parliamentary control over public expenditure is declining, not totally true, but yes, because the Budgetary process itself has not been followed properly. Opposition has not been very effective in doing that. Parliamentary Accounts Committee, role of auditing or CAG, that is also quite an issue. Post-mortem, most of the evaluation is post-mortem in nature. The Parliamentary Accounts Committee or Estimates Committee or something called DRC, departmentally related standing committees, they do not have effectiveness in terms of punishment or suggestions. They cannot do anything except advise. Fine. Then these committees they are bipartisan, they have multi-political party membership, right? But still, because of the changing nature of political relations between political parties, alliances, coalitions, and likewise, right, their effectiveness has further reduced. Also, the functioning of the parliament itself on an average has reduced drastically. So on an average, let's say a parliament should be functioning somewhere around 124, 130 days in a year, normally, right? Whereas it is functioning somewhere around 74, 75 days a year. That itself has reduced the effectiveness of parliamentary control over public expenditure, right? Then emergencies, like for example, when you talk about PM Cares Fund. So there are a lot of other bodies which are being created, which are outside the control of the CAG and the Parliament. Fine. Also, the emergency provisions, the what you can say, the frequency with which the governments are facing different types of crisis and the need for financial support. So many of the times the scrutiny becomes difficult because decisions have to be taken in a very short span of time. Also, you can say the unlike the European countries, right, where we have something called a parliamentary budget or financial councils, which are working, where legislature and the government, right, so or executive, they are coordinating when the budgets are formulated, when the budgets are spent, because here once the budget is approved, then it totally comes under the control of the finance ministry, not under the parliament, right? So they have public finance council or public budgetary councils in many other European countries where this coordination goes on, right? Second ARC has also recommended something like that. So you can use them and say, see, we can improve this functioning by bringing such changes, right? The issues that we have discussed. CAG's role can be made more effective. We can talk about something called pre-audit, right? Concurrent audit. We are obviously talking about today performance audit, outcome-based budgeting, gender-based budgeting. So already we are trying to use different mechanisms where parliamentary control can be made effective, but only when, right? Only when the parliament follows the mechanisms which are already in place. Approval, scrutiny, assessment, expertise. Parliament also needs expertise, right? Generally it lacks that expertise. Fine. 50, the LPG has enhanced the participation of private sector in Indian economy. Kindly write it. I don't think there is any much of discussion we did in that, right? Obviously, this is more about reducing the controls and delicensing the things. This is about promoting or reducing government's role, and this is about allowing the outsiders to enter into the economy. So we have witnessed most of them, right, in Indian context. The success of administrative reforms in a country like India depends upon the political will, right? See, Gerald Kaiden is a scholar. So Kaiden says that what are administrative reforms, right? They are artificial inducements against resistance. That means none of the civil services system, none of the bureaucracy ever wants to reform. This is called bureaucratic inertia. This is also established culture. So when there is a bureaucratic inertia, the need for reforms are necessary, obviously, but the systems will not try to reform. They want to remain the way they are. right? So obviously to work against a system of power, a system which is working for you, that is the instrument which has been created by you, to work somewhere against its existing orientation is very difficult. Whether you talk about RTI, whether you talk about police reforms, whether you talk about the reforms in terms of the RTI, or in terms of this use of technology, digital era governance, right? Uh, and whatever is changing the existing state of the affairs, bureaucracy doesn't want it. So administrative reforms meet with internal resistance, first of all. Secondly, the culture, the nature of the administration is not such. It has the tendency to maintain things as it is. Also, any reform is considered as a threat on the existing system. So they react for that. As you know, under RTI, the civil services were not willing to disclose something called the file notings. File notings are the actual process, actual decision making process of the bureaucrat, how he arrives at the decision. So decisions are here and file notings are here, which is the elaborate process. So they were not willing to disclose that. Fine. That was the actual information that people wanted, that how did you arrive at a decision? Whom did you give the tender? Right? It's not important to know you have given the tender or this much money was spent. But why this much money was spent? If you remember, Vinod Rai, the CAG, who was primarily responsible for the decline, obviously, of the Congress and the governments of the Congress, that was primarily because of the coal scam or the 2G spectrum allocation. So he highlighted most of the things. The book that he wrote, Not Just an Accountant, is very popular, though he had inquiries against him only. But he was the one who made a speculation that there is a presumptive loss of 1,76,000 crores, right? Revenue of the government. Now, this kind of statement obviously is misplaced. It may not be based on facts, but it is quite true, fine, that somewhere uh, any system that is already existing and that is enjoying the perks of being what it is, it does not want to change. So we need to reform that, right? So to reform that, what do you need? First thing is obviously the accountability has to be established. The accountability towards the people, that is enforced through legislature or through the political executive. So what does it require? It requires the will of the legislature. It requires the will of the political system, the council of ministers and the prime minister, and eventually it requires the will of the people. So are you willing to reform your police? No. Are you willing to give greater citizen-centric approach or influence greater citizen-centric approach to the civil services to work for the citizen-centric benefit? No. We want to, right? But they don't want to. So, or citizen charter, see, government has made Right to Public Services Act, fine, 2008. But see, citizen charter law still missing. ERTI is still not very functional. Under the BNS, obviously the change in the law, right? The Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita and whatever. So the changes which have been introduced, right? There is a provision by which obviously you can, what you can do is you can obviously file cases or you can file grievances against the civil servants in terms of cases of corruption. Earlier, right, if you had to file a case or if you want to highlight the case of corruption, then there was a provision that against any civil servant, if the corruption charges are leveled or corruption charges have to be framed, then there is a need for prior permission from the government. CRPC 198, earlier, I'm not talking now. Prevention of Corruption Act, right? So, prior permission was needed. Competent authority would give the permission. Then they were given the opportunity to be heard. And likewise, so they had a lot of protection, privileges, constitutional protections. They cannot be removed from their position or from their job or from their service unless they are removed by the person or the position that appointed them. So if governor has appointed state civil servant and president has appointed the union civil servant, right, they cannot be removed without the president. due process of law. Then you have administrative tribunal. So there are a lot of reasons why these people developed a kind of sense of security within the system. They started taking things casually and they formed strong alliances with the political masters. And because of that reason, the issue of accountability emerges. So how we can overcome this, right? Only when there's a strong will to change the laws, there's strong will to create transparency in the system, when the vote bank politics using the bureaucracy as a means gets reduced, when political influence over administration is reduced, right? So how it can be done? That was the question. So we are talking today about a lot of reforms, right? Whistleblowers Protection Act, reforms in the Prevention of Corruption Act, RTI, IPC, CRPC change now, right? Time to change the Police Act, and likewise. So you can give various suggestions. This scheme, that scheme, we are all trying all that now. So E, performance appraisal system, performance review system, you can talk about all that. Right? We have already introduced Sparrow. Fine, kindly find out what Sparrow is. Except the bird, right? The journey of transformation of local governance has been long, examining the challenges to realize the spirit of GOM. Obviously, there are numerous challenges. One we have just encountered in this question itself. Constitution of State Finance Commission. So what is the essence of local governance? Why the need for local participation? And how we are moving towards something called participatory model of governance. Concept of co-governance and co-ownership, community resource ownership, community resource and management. So we are moving towards that, and we obviously somewhere are putting our efforts to move towards that. Most of the developmental schemes, centrally sponsored schemes, are now to be effectively implemented at the local level. So what are the impediments now? Finance, like 4F plus 1F, 5F, if I say. I can just write this to be better. 5F, right? Functions needed to be given, right? Your 11th and 12th schedule of the Constitution. Functions, finances, just now we said, State Finance Commission, augment the resources of the local bodies, give them more sources of revenue rather than just octroi, toll, and small service charges, right? Basic fee. Rather than that, they need some substantial sources of money. Right? Property tax can be one of them, and that is being done. Swamitwa scheme is basically for that. So functions, finances, functionaries, they need their own human resource. Okay, let me write it more effectively. See. Functions, finances, functionaries, functionality, and framework. Right, so that's the 5F. We need all that. Write about it. That will be the answer. Also, we need to increase women participation. We need to improve social audit mechanisms, accountability mechanisms, social impact assessment, right? And greater integration of CAG with the social audit mechanism, or performance audit of CAG with the social audit, right? Greater participation of people, Gram Sabha, okay, the functions and role need to be redefined. We need to redefine the quorum for the Gram Sabha and the social audit. It should not be just 10%, because that is something very unrepresentative in the local government level, right? Reduce elitism in the local governance, local disparity, local power structure. That is how the existing social disparities have influenced the local governments, right? So you can talk about it. Benefit of use of NGOs, SHG, civil society. We call this as the process of communitarianism. So communitarianism can be enhanced at the local level. Write it. With what aims and objectives was capacity building commission established, right? Evaluate how far it can be. Obviously, it is part of your Karma Yogi mission. So Capacity Building Commission, almost a three-member body whose chairman generally comes from the bureaucrat or the bureaucratic background, the civil servants. It is created as part of the main executive part of the Karma Yogi mission or National Program for Civil Services Capacity Building. So its primary objective is what? To coordinate the development of curriculum and the courses needed for training of civil servants. What is this? Its again important role is supervisory and monitoring of the Karmyogi mission. Coordination with various ministries and departments, sectors, and universities and colleges in terms of developing a better curriculum for training. Fine. Then, uh, obviously, monitoring the data or management of the data, okay, the content or whatever you can say training modules which have been developed on the uh, what you can say the Pragati, sorry, this Karmyogi platform, right? So the platform like I got, right? Government online training. So it has a very strong role in managing, supervising, developing, coordinating, and at the same time, you can say innovating and creating, better courses, better content, better training modules, better platforms for disseminating this knowledge to the civil servants. So somewhere it is trying to integrate the competitiveness, skill, professionalism, uh, somewhere you can say commonality or similarity amongst the civil servants in terms of their skill, training, professionalism, conduct, and to a large extent you can say keeping pace with the international practices, right? International best practices. That is what Capacity Building Commission is. It is essentially the part of your Karmyogi mission. So you can write, you can also write there has been drawbacks in the training programs. It's 10 marks. You don't need to write that much. Seventh is separation of police investigation and prosecution has its own challenges in the context of recent developments. Obviously, recent developments means obviously we are looking at the model police law first of all. Then we are talking about Prakash Singh case. Then we are talking about police reforms and its primary focus till now, or smart policing, that the idea we are talking about today, predictive policing, AI based policing models are emerging. Forensic sciences has developed, right? Original recommendation that law and order, the normal law and order function and investigation functions are very different from each other. Delay in justice delivery mechanisms, right? So you can talk about all these factors and why? Because of the changes, the nature of crime has changed. Technology has become one important aspect of crime. Now, when you say cyber crime, see, so the NIA Act, there's a question on that also, I think. So NIA Act 2008, right? The recent amendments have been done. Obviously, the important aspect is that of cyber terrorism, cyber crime. Technology is becoming such an influential aspect of our private lives, or in general of our collective lives, also not just private lives, that you've seen recently how many scams have happened. So how will it be able to define this kind of crime? Because we have not specifically defined till now what is cyber terrorism, right? So how are we going to define these crimes? BNS has provided a lot of what you can say evaluation and definition of the crimes related to the information technology, right? So that it has done. This is something good in the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. So you can say then evidence, how to define evidence, right? And then how to track, right? To what extent we can, enter and encroach into the domain of privacy in order to control frauds, crimes, security issues, and likewise, right? So you can use this idea that how, right, gender and policing is emerging area. Then we are talking about white collar crimes. We are talking about economic offenses, money laundering, and so many other things. Also, law and order is a state subject, right? But you can say national security is a union subject, right? Or you can say the criminal law is a concurrent subject. So keeping in track with that, you can discuss this question. You can suggest the remedies which have been suggested. Raghavan committee, fine. Then this, what is this? Ribeiro committee, Padmanabhiya committee, and likewise a lot of committees have been there, right? The Niti not been very effective recommendations in this regard, obviously, because police is supposed to be exclusively the state subject. Fine, but we can deal with that. That it is not to be treated merely as a state subject. It's not law and order problem anymore. Policing is way beyond the law and order problem. Fine. Right? So it has challenges of its own, no doubt. Manpower, resource, planning, infrastructure, technology, evidence gathering, training, skill development, right? A lot of states have already pleaded mercy in terms of the resources which they can which they have at their disposal for the police reforms, right? It's quite difficult for them. So because we can look into all these aspects, like NIA, again, like I said, please talk about NIA Act 2008. And now it has been quite effective in terms of the playing as a strong role in counter terrorism, not only in counter terrorism, counterfeiting, in terms of most of the activities which are related to terrorism and internal security, right? So talk about it, right? How the IT Act 66F, I think yes, section 66F of the IT Act, and how cyber crimes and use of cyber technologies for such kinds of criminal activities, how it can be, how it has been able to redefine the role of the NIA, right? So NIA has been very effective. It is very important agency. It's a national investigative agency, no doubt. It has pan-state, pan-India presence. It has almost 18 regional units or branches working, right? And obviously it has trans-state access, right? It has interface with local police, it has interface with intelligence agencies and likewise. So obviously we needed such an agency in the scenario in which we are today. Fine. So kindly talk about these things, right? You cannot be very technical about it, but yes, you can give some examples that how terrorism and technology, narco-terrorism, bioterrorism, and many other facets of terrorism are emerging, and how the internal security and external security are interrelated with each other. Fine. Police public relations are poor in India. What measures are required to strengthen this? This is a perpetual question. Fine. This is a question why you want. It's similar to the UPSC interview question, right? Why you want to join civil services? It's the same question. Every year it is there, right? So citizen or police is a citizen with uniform. Citizen is a police without uniform, right? That's the idea of community policing, or the policing as a civic function. So in India, policing is a civic function, right? And obviously, the primary purpose of police is what? To protect the citizens' interest and to protect the citizens. So how police has or an important role to play in the criminal justice system, right? Criminal justice system comprises of everything which is related to criminal justice, not just police. So it plays a very effective role in a criminal justice system, right? So you can talk about how the attitude of police is, what was the nature of colonial police, what were the recommendation of the first police commission, not in the British time, but after the independence, Dharamvira Commission, 1971, right? Uh, what exactly is the nature of reforms which are needed? How technology can improve the police public interface, right? You can talk about these things. You can also suggest and discuss the ideas of a smart policing and how smart policing is going to reduce the public physical interface of the people with the police, which is one of the biggest issues in their relationship. Right? Working hours of policing, lower level bureaucracy, or street level police, right? That is called street level bureaucracy, constable, sub inspector, head constable, right? What kind of working conditions they face, right? How they are subordinated in the system, and because of that, you can imagine the kind of psychological and mental changes they go through. How public has acceptance of corruption, even though we are focusing on zero tolerance towards corruption, right? But see, police-public relationship is primarily transactional relationship, right? You give and take relationship. So you can discuss all that, and that is how we can move towards the, what you can say, the new era of police reforms, right? Not talking about the usual police reforms since long time we are saying. So we need into the new era of police reforms, right? Uh, which is now moved ahead the Prakash Singh committee, right? So we are into the era of technology and digital era governance, and obviously digital era policing. So we can talk about this idea much better. Fine. The office of CAG in India and its functioning is away from the public eye. Still, it is one of the most important offices under this course. Kindly write, talk about 148, role of CAG, the types of audit it conducts, and how recently the CAG's role in proprietary audit, not proprietary, right? Proprietary, that is the ethical audit, has emerged. How performance audit and social audit of CAG has been effective in increasing the external accountability of the administration. What is Paul Appleby's view on the role of CAG in India? Fine. So if you've read it, kindly bring it. That is how you can write. 8C, the problem of administration in coalition regimes. Can you, this is purely an interesting analytical question. Just a second. Okay, this is the paper. Okay. Fine. See. So this is the paper. Last question. Critically examine the problems of administration in coalition regimes. Critically examine, right? Talk about coalition politics. How it's quite dominantly visible in the post-emergency era. Right? Janata Party and likewise. So you don't need to write all that, obviously 10 marks. So just give a brief glimpse of how in the post-emergency era coalition politics emerged. Right? What were the factors that initiated this coalition politics? What has been the change in the nature of power distribution in society? We have a lot of mobilization of people, better mobilization of people. Opinions have been created, right? Power politics has changed. Single party would have dominated. Today we say it is more representative nature of government, but there is instability of government, right? Anti-defection law had to be brought because of that. And in that scenario, I remember Riggs' analysis of what you say, balanced and imbalanced political system. So we are seeing the emergence of politicization of bureaucracy and bureaucratization of politics, right? That is called bureaucratic politics. If you have read it, you can analyze it very well. Also, we see the vulnerability of the administrative system, how the middle order, middle level administrative or bureaucracy becomes very powerful. There is an analysis by Pratap Bhanu Mehta and Devesh Kapoor, right? They were quite frequent writers of the editorials in Indian Express. Pratap Bhanu Mehta is quite known, though his writings may be to an extent considered to be above average and not very extraordinary, but he has analyzed very well in his Public Institutions in India, the book. So he obviously talks about in coalition regimes how the middle level bureaucracy, because of regional leaders, regionalism, regional political parties becoming very effective at the national level. You talk about TMC, or you talk about SP, or you talk about AIDMK and DMK, and likewise. So how regional political parties have become very powerful and influential. So regional issues have found a place at the national level, right? But many times national level issues have not found a place at the regional level, right? Also, as we have all India services, IAS, IPS, IFOS, and we have middle level bureaucracy coming from the state civil services, because of the regional political parties which are becoming very influential, the state level civil service is becoming very powerful. And this is quite visible in many of the states. If you know, there are certain states where the important postings, in violation of the seniority, in violation of the status of the All India services, many of the prime posts in the state have been given to the state civil servants, who are very close to the chief ministers or the state government. In fact, All India service officials are treated or taken with suspicion, are treated as birds of passage, right? Who come and go, who are not very interested, right? So, see, because of this, the nature of federal relations is changing, the nature of all India services and the impact is changing. Regionalism is dominating the national politics and agenda. Middle level bureaucracy is becoming quite influential in nature. We are seeing frequent conflicts within the bureaucracy, right? We are talking about cherry picking. That is second ARC's view, that how certain governments have their poster boys, their important bureaucrats, the blue-eyed boy of chief minister, and likewise, so you see these kind of polarization of bureaucracy as well. Neutrality is being undermined, politicization is taking place, ideology has a big role. Most of these bureaucrats are looking for political favors and gains and tickets, and somewhere they want to contest elections and likewise. So you can talk about this. Seventh B, right? I think we have missed. Lack of financial resources and independence in managing local funding is hindering the economic and social development of urban area. Kindly talk about how multiple institutions in the local level, you can take an example of Delhi or Bangalore or even Mumbai and Pune, how multiple local institutions, parastatals, state bodies, right? State statutory bodies, special purpose vehicles, central union government bodies, how all of them have created something called the urban management jungle. So how it is not able to operate, right? And this has created a big problem of demarcation of responsibilities and duties. So how urbanization is taking place, how it is unplanned in India most of the times, and how it has created excessive civic pressure on the local bodies and how it can be treated. Transportation, infrastructure, civic amenities, housing, security, right? Taxes, revenue. So many problems have emerged. Kindly talk about it. Otherwise, I think we have more or less covered the questions, right? Right, so we have covered most of the questions. As I already told you, it seems takes little lengthy in nature, but definitely in terms of analysis, paper one gives you a broader scope of understanding and interlinkage. In terms of paper two, you do not have that much of interlinkages, but definitely if you target the issues and you have relevant data and facts with you, you can score very well. This is not a paper where most of the students have the problem that I am not able to understand, I was not able to write much. Why? Because you have not developed a broader orientation of understanding, right? You look into only the micro aspect. You're quite obsessed with some examples. That example will give me more. It is not like that. If you have not explored the issue properly, you'll never be able to write it in a way the question demands. See, most of the questions are analysis, opinion based. They require debate, they require a discussion, they require multi perspective analysis. Whereas paper one, if you're conceptually very clear and you are able to have broad understanding of things, you can write it very well. Even though paper one is more lengthy compared to paper two. In paper two, the problem is of repetition of content, and obviously for that matter, you need to have a theoretical understanding, right? Linkages of theory with the practical aspect, bring contemporary developments, read second ARC, which anybody who tells you that it is not relevant, right, is the biggest liar, whatever. Second ARC is equally relevant for your GS paper 2 and for this. Obviously, you cannot read all the reports. For some, you read summaries. And if you have time, you're a beginner. For some, you can definitely read certain reports. They are very good. In fact, 70% of the questions here are same, from the same booklet, same themes, right? In fact, I have not brought I have not trying to project it that way, but yes, the questions that we gave, right, the uh, projections that we did almost 1 week before the exam, right, almost the entire paper 1 and 2 both are similar. The way, the methodology that we use to teach, that exactly is the methodology, the way papers are asked. So it's not about the topic or the question is coming, like people generally claim that okay, question has come from this. It's not about the question will definitely come from the syllabus, but the idea is what has been the perspective in which the question has been asked, right? And to a large extent, right, we have more or less always been predictable on that. Fine, probably that is the methodology we follow. We don't believe in your rote learning of things, but definitely, right, if you are able to collaborate things together, you can write it better. Fine. See you then. All the best. Thank you so much.